Praise be Jesus Christ. I'm honored to have with me Mr. Timothy Gordon. Most of you know Tim Gordon. He's a teacher, he's a philosopher, he's a YouTuber, he's a writer, he's a retrograde, he's a husband, he's a father. I guess a bit of a skateboarder too, eh?
Not as good as you, Father, but yeah, I was back in the day. I was decent. I was half decent. Yeah.
Well,
How are you?
good to have you on my YouTube channel, Tim. Now, the reason I wanted to interview Timothy Gordon is because I've been a little frustrated lately with I've always been frustrated with the mainstream media, how they report things, but just lately, there's so many times I'll listen to an article or read an article, and I'll think to myself, this just isn't logical. Like, someone with any formation in critical thinking should be able to see that this is just poor reporting. And also, what really kind of got me wanting to speak with you, Tim, is I'm rereading Peter Kreeft's book, Love is Stronger Than Death. And we all love Peter Kreeft. And as I'm reading him, I'm thinking to myself, oh man, does this guy ever know how to think? He has that clarity, that logic, that simplicity, that's just like Catholics need to learn to think as Catholics are supposed to think. And so, Tim, I want you to give us a little teaching on how to think like a philosopher, but specifically a Catholic philosopher. And I want you to, before we begin, just say a little word. You have a little academy. You teach. This is what you teach. You teach philosophy. Tell us about your academy, and then get us going with how to think like a Catholic philosopher.
Thanks, Father, and it's great to be with you today. I love having you on my show, and I love hanging out with you on your show here. My website is timothyjgordon.com. If folks go there, then you can click enroll. We now have up an academy called Retrograde Academy for homeschoolers. We have several course offerings. There are other teachers besides me there. We're getting up and going in the fall. One of the classes is an Aristotle class. I'm going to be giving you a little sample from it today in the teachings of Aristotle. It's Aristotle's moral philosophy, his Nicomachean Ethics. That one I've done 3 times over the past year since I've been here in Mississippi, and I've also done a church history course 3 times since I've been here in Mississippi. The enrollment was huge, and the enthusiasm for the classes was enormous. So those are mainly adult ed. Some homeschoolers were enrolling their high school students. So my wife and I thought, why not offer aid to homeschoolers and enlist some more teachers because enrollment was so huge? And why not continue doing some of the adult ed like an Aristotle class? And it's not necessarily adult. Again, it's kind of mixed attendance, older high school student and younger adults. But also there's some specifically adult courses that are now enrollable for September when we open the rest of the course. I'm talking Intro to Latin, Algebra 1, some other U.S. history course, scripture courses, and some other theology. So along with the Aristotle and the church history course, which I've taught for almost 10 years now. So it's really great. Go to timothyjgordon.com. We're really excited. It's in some sense in the second year, but in a truer sense, it's only up and running now with enrollment open for the fall for the high school students. timothyjgordon.com. Click enroll. And again, watch my show on Rules for Retrogrades, people out there, Father Mark fans. We work in tandem here.
Awesome. Now, your special love is for philosophy. So tell us, Timothy, how do you think like a Catholic philosopher?
It's a good question. Philosophically speaking, what was lost after the Enlightenment, when all of this modernism that we hear so much about as Catholics, the onset was marked by a loss more than any one Catholic thinker in the outstripping of Aristotle. That's what the Enlightenment, an Enlightenment philosophy was. Whether we're talking one of the groups of Enlightenment philosophers called the rationalists, or another group called the empiricists, You don't even have to know who they are. But the agreed upon enemy was Aristotle and his way of thinking, Aristotelianism. So even though he's a pre-Catholic, he's the most important pagan philosopher of the Roman Catholic Church, reclaiming the thought of Aristotle is absolutely central. It's indispensable to right reasoning. You're talking about the recto ratio, the clear rational thinking of someone like Peter Kraft. Aristotelianism is at the heart of it. Our greatest philosopher, the only philosopher to ever outshine Aristotle, is our own Catholic St. Thomas Aquinas. Aristotelianism informed his education. Dante Alighieri, who wrote the Divine Commedia, he said Aristotle's the master of those who know. So in the Enlightenment era, when they got rid of the Aristotelian corpus and they were reconfiguring philosophy altogether, Francis Bacon, an Enlightenment philosopher, had a project called the Novum Organum, which is the new corpus of work, and he is referring to Aristotle's Organum, that they all were barking up the same tree. They were all talking about the same stuff. So what I wanted to do today, when you asked me to do this, is to give a little primer on 4 aspects of Aristotle's philosophy that are absolutely central, indispensable to getting stuff right here in the post-Enlightenment universe when everything went wrong in the Enlightenment. Is that clearish enough for starters?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you say, I think someone with a Catholic sense will see kind of some of the underpinnings or assumptions of how modernists or so many people think today, and we're just like that's just not framed well. That's just not aligned with, you could say, right reasoning. I want to read a scripture. I love scripture. You're going to love this one, Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 4.
Love it.
St. Paul tells Timothy, "For the time will come when people will not tolerate sound doctrine, but following their own desires and insatiable curiosity, will accumulate teachers and will stop listening to the truth and will be diverted to myths." And so again, that's the point of this interview with Tim Gordon, to recognize, what, there's some teachers out there, there's a lot of teachers out there, they just don't have that sound reasoning. So continue.
Okay, that's I love that passage, by the way. I've always loved Second Timothy. I've always loved my namesake in First and Second Timothy because in 2 very different diverging ways, it's amazing stuff that the early church needed to hear, First and Second. Now, the false teachers, absolutely, I must emphasize again, are the post-Enlightenment guys that hated the following 4 teachings in Aristotle, and all 4 of them work together. They dovetail conceptually and they go together naturally. So the first teaching is, from a historical philosophy point of view, how did we get to, in terms of the development of Greek thought, how did we get to this basic idea in Aristotle and Plato? It comes in Plato first, but Aristotle refines his master Plato's thought almost infinitely. So this will be a development in Plato and Aristotle, this first of 4 teachings I'm going to run you through. The basic question in Greek philosophy prior to what's called the Athenian Enlightenment, good Enlightenment, not the Scottish or French Enlightenment. We're talking about 2,000 years later that erased Aristotle. But the Athenian Enlightenment was Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Well, there are Greek philosophers before Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And these Greek philosophers debated the most fundamental topic of change. How does change occur at all? What is occurring when an old man replaces his skin cells? They had some concept for that, actually. And he's growing old, meaning he's going from being a young man into an old man. He's replacing his skin cells. Is he the same substance, the old man? Is he a different substance altogether? What's going on? Now, Before Plato and Aristotle, there was really only a kind of binary way of thinking about this. Most people followed either Heraclitus, who said all the world is fundamentally change. There's nothing but change. Heraclitus said you never step in the same river twice, meaning it's always new water, right? That you're going to be touching. All there is change. And so when the world, as Heraclitus described it, is denoted by pure change, that means there is nothing that is fundamentally unified. There is nothing that is fundamentally one. There's nothing that's fundamentally meaningful, because everything is just in a constant process of decay. The headwaters of the other primary teaching is the philosophy of Parmenides, who taught the exact opposite of Heraclitus. His set of teachings was referred to as Parmenideanism. It was called monism. And really, Heraclitus was a monist too, because he's saying the world is fundamentally one thing. Parmenides says the world is all like a solid brick. There's only one thing. It is stasis itself. It's the opposite of change. It's a little difficult to even imagine what Parmenides was talking about, because both of these thinkers are wrong. Parmenides, unlike Heraclitus, who said the world is pure change, is going to say the world is fundamentally made of stasis. There's no such thing as change. Ostensible change that we think we see, Parmenides and his students would popularize, are actually illusions. If we think we see an arrow flying through the air, this must be an illusion. There's something called Achilles versus the hare. It's a fallacious proof that Meno and Parmenides and the rest of his disciples used to show there isn't any change. So Parmenides says the world is all fundamentally one thing. It's pure being, pure stasis. Heraclitus says the world is all one thing, but it's the opposite. It's pure becoming, pure fundamental breakdown and decay. Into this historical situation comes Socrates, the teacher of Plato, who is the teacher of Aristotle. So you have a kind of, father, son, father, grandfather, intellectual provenance between these three thinkers. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These three thinkers are so famous. You know their names because of this issue, this first issue that I'm going to talk to you guys about today. Change. How do we account for change? Everything must either be all change or no change, as the ancient Greeks before these thinkers configured it. Well, this isn't right. Particularly Aristotle's mentor, Plato, conceived of it as such. There is a component to the universe that absolutely vindicates what Heraclitus is saying about pure change. That realm is what we would call the material realm, the realm of matter, the realm of what things are made of. Matter, the wood, the aluminum, the cheap products that this $10 Walmart chair is made out of. All of these materials are absolutely, as Heraclitus described all the world, a bit hastily he described it, but they are breaking down, right? Anything that's made of matter that has mass, as we say in physics, is in a constant state of breakdown. If you collect baseball cards, the reason a card that's in gem mint condition is worth extra is because somehow you've preserved it being in that 10 condition. And as the world happens to it, as existence happens, it'll break down. It'll sooner or later become a 9 or then an 8, all the way down to total decomposition over the course of the next 100,000 years. So matter is the way that Heraclitus described it. But again, both Heraclitus and Parmenides were monists. They thought there was only one fundamental thing in the world. They didn't see the two-ness of the world. Plato and Aristotle will also accept that Parmenides was part right, And Parmenides was right in the realm of what we call form. Form corresponds with the stasis, the non-breakdown, the immutability, that means unchangingness, the fundamental meaningfulness of the world stemming from a lack of change is correct, but it's outside of the realm of matter. It's in the realm of form. So Plato, Aristotle's teacher, is really the first one that posits monism, Heraclitus's brand, which says the world is all one thing, change, or monism, Parmenides' brand, which says the world is all fundamentally one thing, stasis, no change. Monism is wrong. And Plato is going to conceive of a two-ness of the world. We call it Platonic dualism. Everything in the world is comprised of matter and form. Everything we see. So this cheap $10 Walmart chair that I'll be adverting to here is also comprised of matter and form. Its matter is the cheap aluminum and plastic and whatever polyurethane, whatever things are making it up. That's how you would describe the chair materially. That's easy. You can weigh it. Matter has mass, as everyone learns in Physics 1. It's got all these properties. It's got color. It's got a surface. That's matter. Matter's easy to talk about, easy to discuss quantitatively. It's also easy to discuss qualitatively. The trickier part, the more invisible part, the more meaningful part is the realm of the forms. And when we talk about the realm of the forms, what we're really discussing is the chairness of the chair. This is the way philosophers speak about it. And when you take an intro to philosophy course, you might want to punch your professor in the face because he starts sounding like a nerd. He'll say something like the chairness of the chair. The Greek word is the eidos, or also simply the forma. This means the idea of the chair. And think about it this way. This is a copy of the idea of the chair, right? Made, from the idea, the inception of the chair builder. But there is an ideal chair. This is kind of Platonism. We'll talk about the divergence between Plato and Aristotle in a second. There is an ideal chair, right? It always supports a human being sitting on it. It's probably got 4 legs. Now there are different kinds of chairs, right, that can be instantiated. There are different species of that ideal chair. But the ideal chair doesn't break down. It's not material, it's formal. So it doesn't break down. It doesn't actually have the accidents of a material chair. It doesn't have color. It doesn't have a weight. It's an idea. This is the eidos of chair. But you can't make the argument, Father Mark, that there is such a thing as matter without form, right? Just because the formal aspect of the universe, this is what Plato was up against. Skeptics of his day saying what people watching this video might be thinking now. That, well, really, isn't there just matter, no form? What would, in the case of a what we call an artifact, a made-up thing, what would the chair maker have made the chair from if there weren't some conception? Why do all of these chairs, I'm looking at another one across from me in the room, we have multiplicity of chairs. It's different. This one swivels. It might have different features, but they all fundamentally support the same essence, the same definition of chair. They all touch the floor. They all have 4 legs. They all are big enough to support a human, and they all do the fundamentally same thing. They're all about the same height. That's kind of the second thing I want to talk about here today, which is the difference between Plato's conception of form and matter. Now, this is the revolution of the Athenian Enlightenment. There's not just something corresponding with form, as Parmenides thought, or something corresponding with matter, as Heraclitus thought. There's both form and matter. That's Platonism. Okay, so that's kind of the where we'll bridge to talking about the second big concept. But did you want to stop me, or did you have any questions right there?
Again, for the viewers who might be like, well, what in the world does this have to do with being a good Catholic? You see, we're getting close to the mystery of the soul, the essence. I remember when we studied Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, who builds on Aristotle, our Dominican professor was talking about, like, for example, the foxness of a fox. You have a fox, but that's a species. There's a foxness to it, and this fox is eating rabbits. And there's a rabbitness, like a rabbit's not a butterfly, it's not a bird. There's some kind of essence, some kind of form, some kind of soul. And he says you have this transition that these rabbits are being turned into a fox because the fox is eating them, and it gets into the mystery of these eternal things, these things of the soul, things of the spirit. And so that's kind of the whole importance of this, because Thomas Aquinas is the one who really kind of brings reason to so much of our Christian Catholic mystery. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. But what we want to avoid is, you're absolutely correct. Thomas will, as they say, baptize Aristotle philosophically and theologically. But when you read the philosophy of Thomas, he's not doing much to the way, we'll talk about it in a second in the kind of lesson part 2, Aristotle's conception of form and matter, which will differ some from Plato's, and it gets closer to the truth, much closer to the truth. Thomas doesn't have to do much. He doesn't have to massage Aristotle's philosophy much to make it square with the form and matter inherent in the human person. He will not have to massage Aristotle at all in order to make it consistent with the form and matter, the species and accidents of the Eucharist. Zwingli, one of the great, by great I don't mean good, I mean great bad Protestant reformers, who really argued against Luther that we need to get rid of the idea of the real presence in this new Reformation thing. He accused Catholicism of being this old Aristotelian cult. Why was it an Aristotelian cult? Because Zwingli said, look, the explanation for the real presence, transubstantiation, is entirely Aristotelian. It's this Aristotelian idea where the form, the Eucharist, is essentially Christ's body and blood, but it's formally Christ's body and blood, but it's materially bread and wine. He says this is just an exercise in Aristotle, and he kind of got it wrong anyway. That's not it. But form and matter are close to what we call species and genus. Nevertheless, you can, once you understand, Father Mark, this is no exaggeration, Aristotelianism, which is basically the closest thing to a sort of natural law in moral law, but a kind of, if we zoom out, a natural law of understanding the universe, almost like the closest thing, dare I say, to Holy Spirit infused way of understanding the basics of the world around us. It would be the teachings of Aristotle. Thomas doesn't massage those much at all. Now, there are some areas where Thomas will take the philosophy of Aristotle and will say, okay, well, this is raw. It's raw hewn, but here's how you can use the system of Aristotelianism to cross it with scripture. And it's a little different when he's talking about theology, but we're just talking about philosophy basically today. He doesn't do anything much to it, because Aristotle got it so right. And if one doesn't have a proper physical understanding of the world, they can't have a proper metaphysical understanding of the world. If one lacks that, a proper metaphysical understanding of the world, then one can't begin to do theology, right? You need physics to do metaphysics, metaphysics to begin to understand theology and proper anthropology, even like what is, the right way to understand the human soul correctly. So
yeah, and that's the reason kind of bringing you on today is it's important, but it's beautiful. Like, it's beautiful when you can kind of enter into the mystery of the soul, the universe, creation, everything, and with that, like you said, it's almost you're pushing reason as far as you can. It's almost divinely inspired. I guess in some ways it kind of is, but it's being able to think that way when you can read books like Peter Kreft's, just beautiful books, and say, yeah, like I kind of get this. I mean, it's the work of a lifetime to see, you know. But so, anyways, continue.
Excellent. So we've traced this isn't a history of philosophy lecture, but there is a historiography to it. The reason that people out there have heard the name Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they don't maybe know much what teachings are corresponded with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. But the reason you know the names is because they comprised a good enlightenment, the Athenian Enlightenment, which basically posited, it all went into this most basic understanding of the world. I don't know if you can see this. Form and matter, right? Form and matter. Form corresponds with what formerly Parmenides had taught, that everything's frozen. Matter corresponds with what Heraclitus taught, that everything is change. Plato first posits this, and so I'm going to talk about, before I go back to Aristotle in a sec, because he really corrected a lot of what Plato got wrong, which is, I don't know if you like guitar. Jimi Hendrix was an innovator, but he took the genius, 15 years later, of Stevie Ray Vaughan to play a bunch of his songs and really clean them up. Jimi Hendrix was kind of rough-hewn innovation. Someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan was playing a bunch of his songs really skillfully. That's kind of how you should think of Plato and Aristotle. Plato comes up with a creative genius, such as to modify and describe the world formerly, vaguely, horribly described by Parmenides and Heraclitus. Aristotle's going to clean it up. So first we have to just talk about basic Platonism, form and matter, and it's really easy, but I want to talk about one of the basic difficulties of Platonism, form and matter.
Hey, Tim, when you show your whiteboard, maybe put it right in front of your face, because we're just recording the center of you. So anything you show inside,
yeah.
No one will see.
Okay, it's probably more for me than anyone, but yeah, I'll do that if I flip it around. Mm-hmm. So Plato conceived of the world as of form and matter. Anything in the world that is a thing, a substance, has both form and matter. Its form is the unchanging, the essence of the thing, if you will, the soul of the thing. Like there's the form of a human being is definitely its soul. It's unchanging. It's undeniable. It's what gives meaning to the thing, and it's the singular principle of the thing, right? The chairness of the chair. You discussed, Father Mark, the foxness of the fox. In mathematical principles, particularly for the geometer, it becomes really clear. Pretend I was holding like a dinner triangle that the cowboys used to use, right? That's an imperfect triangle. There is no such thing as a perfect triangle. There's no such thing as a perfect circle. Let's say I had some circle made out of metal or something like that. Neither of those is actually a triangle or a circle. So this is how you prove Platonism correct, at least thus far. You can't make one that's perfectly, if we're talking about triangles, 180 degrees, three sides. It won't be for long anyway, because it'll be bent out of shape. It's made of matter, so it necessarily decays. It necessarily won't be whatever it started out as for long. Over the long course of time, all matter decays. No questions asked. And even if it's not decaying, it has cells, it has accidents, so it can't be the perfect form of a triangle or a circle. But think about it this way. Plato, who was very interested in mathematics, knew that there had to be the form of things, in this case a triangle or a circle, because we can describe them. We know that the diameter of a circle, we know the area of a circle. If I increase the radius by 2, then we can describe the area or the diameter of that circle Exactly, right? 2 pi or pi r squared, 2 pi r squared are respectively the area and the perimeter of a circle. So how do we make that description when we can't even instantiate out of real material items the circle that we just described on paper, right? I can tell you, well, if a circle has a radius of 9 inches, then, well, then, pi r squared, pi times 81, will be its area. I can't even build you that circle, even if I'm a master builder. Even Google couldn't build you a perfect circle. It's impossible to do. But we can describe it. We can manipulate it mathematically. We can modify it. We can talk about it. So there is reality to the form of things. As a matter of fact, Plato's philosophy is built out of the idea that form is what he called the really real, right? Form is not only real, even though it's invisible, it's more real than matter itself. Form is the really real. And Plato gets into some troubles here. Now, this is great work. So he innovated this. The rest of the world is in his debt for having done so. But if you ever have seen the School of Athens painting, have you ever seen that one, Father Mark? Very famous. It's actually in the Vatican for the reason that I'm talking about right now. It's in the Vatican Museum. Plato is at the center. It's all the philosophers, many of whom did not live at the same time, hanging out, doing whatever they did, kind of expressively instantiating their philosophy. Plato and Aristotle are at the center because they're the two greats. Plato is doing this, and Aristotle is doing this with his hand. The reason why is because they're each sort of acting out, play acting, what they added to this conversation. Now, Plato says the realm of the forms, all of the forms of all the things, all the chairs, all the men, all the dogs, foxes, even things like happiness, are all in what he called a noetic heaven. And so he's pointing up. He's saying they're all divorced from this realm here below, which is the realm of matter, right? There's a kind of a hard divide in the way Plato thought about this. Now, he understood there are limitations with this way of thinking, that yes, there are two realms. He's a dualist, unlike Heraclitus or Parmenides. And he understood there has to be some interaction, some causal interaction between matter and form. I'll talk about that in a second in the third property. But he didn't understand how it was. He understood them as two distinct realms. Okay? Even though form is the really real, and a thing, a chair, a material chair, participates in its form. This chair, this cheap $10 Walmart metal chair, participates in the chairness of the chair. It participates in the properties that it shares with this other chair over here. Plato couldn't say how, and it was sort of the grave limitation of his philosophy. Aristotle could, right? Aristotle took what Plato called form and matter, right? The two-ness of the universe, and he modified it just a little bit into what can only be described as form in matter. Now, I have scare quotes around the word in, and you'll see why in a second. Form is not spatial. To use a preposition like in or on or, below, beneath, beside, I'm teaching my 3-year-old Go Dog Go, which was my favorite, like Dr. Seuss book as a kid. And what it really teaches is prepositions. I didn't realize that at the time. Prepositions are all spatial, and spatial properties all correspond with the material realm. So when Aristotle says form is in matter, it's an analogy. He's saying, he's beginning to teach this idea coming from two Greek words called hylomorphism And hylomorphism explains why Aristotle, in the School of Athens painting, is kind of rebuffing Plato, who's saying this. So there's this totally other realm of form, intelligible. The intelligible part of a thing is its form, right? It's not intelligible if it were just matter, the way Heraclitus says. Yes, that's right. But Aristotle says the form is here below, in matter. The forms of things are in them, not really in them, but they're around them. The aura of the thing, the intelligible properties of the thing, actually situates what those things are for. So look at this chair, or imagine this chair anyway. You can't see it where you're sitting. This is how I would normally give the lecture. This metal chair I'm sitting in right now, if you look at it and you look at the chair across from me, it's behind the screen. You can't see it. They're totally different. That one's a very nice chair. This is a very crappy chair. That they're made of mostly different things. That one has a fair amount of softening material. That one has a kind of single prong down to the legs. Whatever. They're different, but there's an intelligibility, and this comes from the form of the chair. There's an intelligibility to the fact that they both serve the same function. And the Greek word for that is ergon. And they both have the same purpose, or telos. The Greek word is telos. So form in matter tells us, this is called hylomorphism. This is Aristotle's big contribution, his big correction of Plato. It tells us that when you look at a chair, you can see there are physical indicia, physical evidence of the invisible properties of the chairness of the chair, right? Like that chair, I'm looking at the nice one. I wish I were sitting in it right now. It looks like it sustains basically a human height form. A human is seated or squatting, looks strong enough to sustain, 150 to 200 pounds. It has all of these properties that correspond with precisely its ergon, but it's what it does, its function, and its telos, its end. Why was it created? Okay, it's ergon and it's telos, and all of those properties are in it. Yeah.
Let's get into the final cause, and I have mass there shortly. So and I know again in Peter Kreeft's book he gets into the whole what's the end of something. So maybe just share with the viewers that kind of contribution from Aristotle, how that's kind of set the tone for Catholic philosophy.
Got it. Yeah. So this is once you get the distinction between Aristotle and Plato, this and this, you get into both really. I guess I really only had three things to teach your audience today anyway. The third and the fourth teaching, that which makes Aristotelianism utterly indispensable, is that Aristotle will say, okay, so all things that exist actually have not one cause. They have four causes. Four causes, and the most important of these four causes we just described. Look at it this way. So four causes for every single thing. Let's stick with the chair since we're closing up here. Materially speaking, the matter is a cause of the chair. It causes it to be. All of the raw material that go into the making of that chair, the metal, polyurethane, the cushion, whatever, that's one of its causes. The formal cause, as you can guess, is just the thing's form. Its intelligible principle that actuates the matter. That also causes it, because you can't have the matter without the form. Then there's also an efficient cause, which is the builder of the chair and the processes he used, hammering or soldering, whatever he did. Okay, and then there's the final cause of the chair, which is its purpose. What caused the builder to do the efficient causation, to hammer it and make it? And it's, happy seating or something like that. So you got efficient cause, material cause, final cause, formal cause. And what I can tell you, Father Mark, is in the Enlightenment, very self-consciously, 100% self-consciously, both of the major realms of thinker, the bad Enlightenment now that's taken place around 1700, both the rationalists represented by Descartes, who people probably have heard of in math, and Francis Bacon, who I quoted earlier. They both agreed, even though one's a rationalist, one's an empiricist. What they agree is they want to do away with two of the causes. They want to give them the axe. Which two causes do they want to axe? The most important two. Final causation. So they say in the university from now on, we will not talk about, when we talk about the science that goes into a thing, the physics and metaphysics, we'll not talk about the final cause, the telos, anymore. It's just like an agreed upon legal fiction. We won't do this. And the world, particularly the science world, doesn't talk about final causes anymore. The other cause to get the axe was the formal cause. The formal cause is the form. That this literally means we're not doing metaphysics if we're not talking about a thing's formal cause. If all that we're allowed to talk about after the Enlightenment is the two causes other than final and formal, if those are X'd off, we're just talking about what things are made of, their material cause. Bacon and Descartes left the material cause standing. Okay, we can talk about the measurable properties. And the efficient cause is how it was made. But we can't talk about the universe in a meaningful way. What people need to understand from today's three-part lesson is the reason that everyone's a sort of natural-born atheist, everyone's a natural-born materialist, is because all we believe in by design after the Enlightenment, all we're brainwashed in, is to think materially along with efficiently. We're not thinking formally or finally because very specifically the Enlightenment was a reaction against the four causes of Aristotle, particularly form and the final cause. So it was all set up. It's a turkey shoot. That's what I'm telling you.
And just practical application for our viewers. I mean, you all know that our world has gone bonkers with trying to redefine anything and everything at a whim. It's like, oh, today I feel like a kangaroo. Oh, I think I'm a kangaroo today. And like, who's to say you're wrong? I mean, like there's no final cause. There's no,
formal cause. Without a formal cause, we can't say you're wrong. That the definition for kangaroo lies in formal cause.
Yeah. And so again, this type of thinking that almost the whole academic world has embraced hook, line, and sinker. Again, we as Catholics, we're like, well, no, wait. Things are created with a purpose, with intention, and they have an end. And so you can't just decide that a fox is acting a little bit like a chicken today. So maybe it's actually a chicken. Maybe that little furry creature with a beautiful big tail, maybe it's actually a chicken because, who's to say it's a fox? It's like, well, again, this kind of thinking is absurd. And to get the kind of the pillars, these are foundations of or the frames of how we think as Catholics, we have to go to Thomas Aquinas, back to Aristotle, and again, the point you made earlier is like Aristotle, it's not just one way of thinking. No, he tapped into truth. He tapped into reality. He tapped into, there's that element of mystery that we can understand with proper reasoning. He tapped into that, and Thomas Aquinas discovered that. Is that right? Does that you probably have a much better way of articulating? Am I pretty much right the way I said that?
100%. Aristotle is the systematic philosopher par excellence. He's the one that gave us a system for physics, metaphysics, the philosophy of man, ethics, politics. It's all based on this hylomorphism. And it gets more complex as you study metaphysics compared against, political philosophy. But he's all operating on hylomorphism, which is form and matter. And it explains everything. It's really remarkable. So you're not exaggerating. One feels like, this feels a little exaggerative, a little bit one size fits all. This is Aristotelianism. The Enlightenment was fundamentally an agreed upon legal fiction. Let's go away from Aristotelianism. Let's go away from the scholastic philosophy, which captured Aristotelianism. They meant Aquinas. And the world now is fundamentally disconnected from reality. If you can't define something by its the two most important of the four causes, formal and final, then yeah, a fox can be a chicken. You can just say, oh, it's got slightly different matter. Absolutely right.
And
Yeah, you could get this stuff on my courses at timothyjgordon.com. Go click enroll. We're starting a new series of classes in early September. This is the kind of stuff we do, man. We're bringing people to the light, person by person. And I really appreciate you bringing me on, Father Mark.
yeah, well, thank you for being on. And like I said, it's just so important for people to know you're not meaningless. Like, you're not an accident. You were made, as Scripture said, you were formed in your mother's womb by God. You were created by the logos, the word, logic. There's God created you deliberately with something in his mind, in his heart, and you have there's meaning to your life. And you do have a mission. God has a plan for your life. And so, again, these whole formal cause, final cause, we need to discover that about ourselves and to know that and embrace it and proclaim it. We're not just random, highly sophisticated blobs of organic matter. We're more than that. We were made, in the mind of God, the logos, the word through whom all things were made. Again, philosophers can express that better than I can, but it's so important, especially for our Catholic young people, to be formed in right thinking. So just one more time, Timothy, share with our viewers how they can take your courses online.
Go to timothyjgordon.com, click enroll. It's the Retrograde Academy. We've done it for a year for adults. Now we're going to do a mixture of adults and homeschoolers aid. And you can go check out the 6 or 7 courses we're offering there. A couple of them are philosophy courses, a couple are theology, some are Latin and algebra. timothyjgordon.com. I really appreciate it, Father. God bless you.
Awesome, Tim. It was great having you today, and we're keeping you in our prayers, and keep us up here in Canada in our prayers, and blessings on your family, your wife, your 6 children. You're a blessed man, and again, thanks for being with us. Viva Cristo Rey.
Thanks, Father.